Hello again and welcome back to my channel here, Trinity Therapy. I had planned today to wrap up my introduction to my 4-step program on how to process, heal and release past trauma memory. But last week on a social media platform I had a kind of a rude awakening I'd like to talk to you about today. We all know that the problem we suffer in our lives, the conditions we have, they're not genetic. They're not heritage. They're not handed down from father to son. They're in the environment we grow up in, the environment we work in, the environment we live in. If we're in a dysfunctional workplace, our work is going to suffer. If we get out of that dysfunctional workplace and into a healthy space, we change. The environment is the problem, not who we are or what we're suffering from. I also like to mention that in the Bible, God said that the worst sin, we've heard that the 10 Commandments, the rules of life, and the Sermon on the Mount talks about the ideals of how to live your life, but there's one sin which features the wrath of God, and that if you harm even one hair of an innocent child, you face the wrath of God. Better to tie a millstone around your neck and drown the depths of the sea than face God on Judgment Day if you've harmed a child in any way, shape or form. And last week on a social media website, a young man, I'd like to call him a young man, but I believe he's like a young 17-year-old child. He was speaking about the fact that at the age of 7, he'd been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and put on medication. And over the next 10 years, he developed anxiety and depression and was medicated for both of those as well. And here he was at age 17, disillusioned, full of despair and hopelessness and wanting to end his life. And the problem here is, we're treating the child as the problem, we're treating the response of the child as the problem, and not the environment. The child isn't the problem, the child is trying to cope with an unhealthy environment by attention deficit, depression, anxiety. If we don't fix or change the environment the child is living in, it will get worse, as in this child's case. Targeting the child is the problem, medicating the child doesn't help the child in any way, shape or form. We need to target the environment. The child isn't the problem. The child's coping skills of fight, flight and freeze, which appear as attention deficit, depression and anxiety, aren't the problem. They may become dysfunctional, but they're not the problem. The problem is the environment the child is in. When we play into this, we become part of the problem and not part of the solution. If a child is brought to you and they have attention deficit or they have anxiety or depression, the parents should be brought in as well, and there should be some way where we tackle the environment. How can we improve the environment for the child? What are the child's needs? Rather than letting the environment stay as is and treat the child as the problem. I believe that we have gone too far. I believe that there should be some law in place where children under the age of 18 are not medicated for their moods. That there's a task force in place to target the environment. When a child becomes of adult age, where they become a young man and they're working for a living, they can make the choice to be medicated, and as an adult that's perfectly reasonable. But to medicate children, I think is very wrong. I think we've become part of the problem and not part of the solution. If a child comes to you with anxiety or depression or a disassociation, the problem is the environment the child is growing up in, is living in. And we need a whole task force to work at treating the environment, improving the environment. Tell the child, you're not the problem, you've been coping very well by disassociating or by being anxious or being depressed. We're going to work with your parents to make your environment healthier for you. When the environment becomes healthier, the child becomes healthier. When the child learns in a healthy environment, their coping skills become healthier. We have to work on the environment, not the child. The child isn't the problem. When we see the child as the problem and we treat the child as the problem, we rob him of its youth, of its childhood. Like that 17-year-old young man who feels like giving up. The child isn't the problem, it's the environment the child is growing up in. Thank you for listening to me today.